Hello everybody and welcome back to Rebellious Menstruation. This is a book review on Malinda Lo's two books. This one is Last Night at the Telegraph Club and this one is A Scatter of Light. So they're two connected books, I suppose, in a way. They're both coming out stories, and Last Night at the Telegraph Club, which we'll start with, is this story about Lily Hu, who is a American-born Chinese daughter of two immigrant parents. And at 16, 17, she basically meets a Kathy Miller, and they start going to a lesbian nightclub, which is actually the Telegraph Club. And this is kind of like an awakening for Lily. Lily lives in the very enclosed Chinese community of San Francisco in 1954, which is when this book is set. She's, goes to high school. She has younger brothers. She's the oldest daughter. Her parents, this is the era of McCarthyism, and it's post-World War, obviously. So while her father is a doctor and works at the Chinese hospital, and so they live in an apartment. She's kind of got like a cordoned off room in the corner of this little apartment, and her brothers share like the other bedroom, and her parents have a bedroom. But she's kind of very enclosed in this community, and she's very quiet, she's very studious, and she leads a life very much what is expected of her. But she does have dreams of being a scientist and pursuing science, and her aunt, who lives in Sacramento, is also a scientist. So Lily's, in a way, very much is what is expected of her in a lot of ways. But of course, she, as part of this process of coming out, of finding her identity, of becoming really an adult, because she's in her final year of school and she's looking at going to university and pursuing all of those types of things. And while in every other way she's a responsible daughter, student, she also has spent a lot of her life being so quiet that she's followed, and she's been obedient, and she hasn't really questioned the authorities in her life. So as a consequence, she kind of falls out of favour with her best friend, because her best friend's been the person that she just kind of goes along with. Her best friend has been the one that's led them places, has done stuff with them, has kind of really been the one to make a lot of the decisions, and Kathy was really the one who's taken her away from this, or has at least allowed her to make decisions about herself that have challenged these types of things. It gets to a tipping point where her kind of former best friend that she's had a falling out with kind of visits her and basically says, I know this Telegraph Club gets raided. Lily escapes and Kath doesn't, but Lily's best friend knows that Lily has been at this nightclub with another girl, and with basically what everyone at the school suspects is a lesbian. So, or at least queerly coded. So they end up, the best friend threatens to dob her out, essentially, or bribes her, and Lily chooses to tell her truth to the parents. Lily just goes, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore, I'm not hiding anymore. And the kind of consequence of this for her is that they send her away with her aunt. And she goes to Sacramento with her aunt, because the thing that Lily, I suppose, it doesn't have a greater understanding of is her father's being pursued, and her father has had his papers taken off of him. His father isn't a born citizen, he's a naturalized citizen, and as such, in this era of McCarthyism and post-World War, and they're Chinese, and it's kind of, there's a lot of racial tension that is surrounding this situation that Lily potentially doesn't necessarily have really the vibe of as a 17-year-old girl, because she is encapsulated in this community, and she's encapsulated in the San Francisco Chinese community, and therefore kind of understands to a certain extent that she's an outsider even in her own country, but also to a certain extent she's been born, raised there, so she's had very much a quintessential upbringing there, even as an outlier. So she gets sent away, and while very upset with this, that's kind of the encapsulation of the book, because in 1954 this was shocking, and her parents couldn't really afford to have their daughter in compromising positions when they were essentially on the verge of being deported. As a coming out story, it is really quiet and it is really subtle. She doesn't burst onto the scene, she doesn't boom onto the scene. She takes risks, and the risks have consequences in her personal life. So, on to A Scatter of Light. So A Scatter of Light is kind of set far, far later in the piece, and it's set in between 2008 and like 2023, well, but most of it's set in 2008, and the main character in this story is a girl named Aria, who is 18, and Aria essentially in her last kind of week of school, or last kind of bit of school, attends a party with her friends, gets a boy, takes topless photos of her and posts them on the internet, and this goes viral, and her school basically, I think she graduates, but her parents lose it and basically send her to her grandmother's in California, in a little tiny community. So she has to spend her last summer with her artist grandmother in California. Of course, they're from her dad goes to her dad's a writer and a professor, and her mum's in Germany as an opera singer, so her parents aren't together, and probably explains why her name's Aria. So she spends her last summer before college or university hanging out, and she meets essentially her grandmother's gardener is queer-coded from the start. She attends her, this gardener invites her out, and essentially for her it is her queer awakening, because she hangs out with essentially this queer community while she's in California. She has an affair with her grandmother's gardener, and this obviously breaks up the gardener and her wife. And because it's kind of so late in the piece, and where Last Night at the Telegraph Club was really centered around the Chinese community in a post-World War II and McCarthyism, so the kind of the dramatic events were happening around their story. It's much the same with A Scatter of Light. So this is really enmeshed in this time frame of Prop 8 and the legalization of marriage for adults, and that's kind of where the surrounding things is, that this is kind of a microcosm of a story that is set really within quite a much bigger area, or much bigger time of loudness within the communities. And that's kind of what makes it interesting, is those type of things are kind of there, but they're not necessarily the loudest things in the story, but they do influence like Lily being sent away in this, and in this one it influences the way she responds to her art. So her grandfather, who was deceased, was a professor. Her grandmother was an artist. Her dad is a writer. Her mother is an opera singer, and so she's kind of surrounded by this art all the time, and she wants to be an artist, and she's going to university for art. Her father is a professor at Amherst, I believe, but she does kind of feel ditched and dumped by her friends. She feels ditched and dumped by her family, and then kind of discovers this little bit of community within this kind of like queer cosm of community. So she does, at the kind of the end of the story is really her grandmother dying and her attending this funeral and going off to university, having broken up this relationship. So both of these stories are about coming to an understanding about yourself, and that isn't always without consequence, because it isn't without consequence for either one of the main characters in this story. So the connection between the two stories is Aria's mother. Her cousin is Lily. So, or her parents' cousins, I suppose, would be her aunt, and uncles would be all connected. So Aria discovers the stories about Lily and Kath, and it turns out that Lily and Kath stay together for the rest of their kind of lives, or they're still together in a scatter of light. And how kind of prop 8 comes into this is Lily and Kath marry after 50 years of being together. So both stories are really, really sweet, and really, really cute, but they are still kind of like really set in this burgeoning adulthood of where you're trying to push through a lot of the things that are happening in your life, and don't necessarily understand all of that the way it works. So both of these are adorable books. Hopefully, that helps you decide whether you want to buy them or not. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your morning, afternoon or evening, depending of course where you are in the day, and I will catch up with you next video. Bye everyone.